You spend your whole life thinking your parents would protect you, that no matter how flawed, how messy, how imperfect things got, they'd never betray you, because family is supposed to be the line no one crosses. But I learned the hard way. Sometimes, the people who raise you are the ones holding the knife. It happened 2 weeks after my grandmother's funeral. I was still in black, still waking up with swollen eyes, still clutching her last letter like a lifeline. We were sitting in my dad's study, same place I used to color in when I was 6, when he looked at me and said it. "You were never really my daughter. That's why you weren't in the will." No apology, no hesitation, just a flat statement like a verdict. And just like that, every memory I'd ever trusted cracked wide open. Not his daughter? Then who was I? Why now? Why after Grandma was gone? It took me less than 5 seconds to realize this wasn't a confession. It was a tactic, a strategy to erase me from a $2.5 million inheritance and claim it all for himself and my brother. But what he didn't know was that I wasn't just grieving. I was already questioning everything. Why had Grandma changed her will just 6 weeks before she passed? Why had the signature looked strange? Why had I found a torn photo missing half the face hidden inside a cookbook in her attic? I wasn't walking away. I was walking into something bigger than any of them realized. Because when someone tries to rip your identity away like a mask, you don't break down. You get quiet. You get precise. And you make sure the truth doesn't just come out, it explodes. This is the story of how I exposed a lie 20 years in the making. How I turned a forged will and a fake confession into a courtroom twist no one saw coming. And how my grandmother made sure I would win, even after death. So if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, if you've ever been told you don't belong, stay with me. Because sometimes the biggest revenge is simply proving you were always meant to be there. If you looked at us from the outside, we looked like a close family. Sunday dinners with cornbread and sweet tea. Christmas mornings in matching pajamas. Polished smiles for church and the neighborhood potluck. But the inside, well, that was a different story. Growing up, I always felt like a guest in my own home. My dad, Martin, was charming to outsiders, the kind of man who could make strangers laugh within minutes. But behind closed doors, his warmth was selective. And his patience, even more so. My older brother, Ethan, was the golden child. Star quarterback, honor roll, Dad's little protege since the age of 6. They had their own world, one I was rarely invited into. I used to wonder if I did something wrong. Why he never hugged me the way he hugged Ethan. Why his praise felt conditional, transactional, like I had to earn it. But I always had Grandma June. She was my real anchor. She raised me during my earliest years, while my parents were figuring things out overseas. She taught me how to bake her cinnamon apple pie from scratch and let me stay up late to watch old detective shows. She told me I was special in ways no one else seemed to notice. She made me feel like I mattered. We had our own rituals. Crossword puzzles every Sunday afternoon. Matching scarves during the winter. And the lake house, that place was ours. A small 2-bedroom cabin tucked into the pines, with a creaky swing and fireflies in July. It was the only place that felt like home. So when she pulled me aside one afternoon, just months before her health declined, and said, "When I'm gone, the lake house is yours. You've always belonged there." I believed her. I didn't care about the money. I didn't want jewelry or stocks. I just wanted that house, that symbol, that space we built together. But then, everything changed. Grandma got sick fast, lung cancer. Within 3 months, she was gone. The funeral was quiet, rainy. Dad gave a eulogy full of hollow compliments. Ethan wiped fake tears. And I could barely breathe, not just because I lost her, but because something felt wrong. She had promised me something, but no one mentioned it. No one brought it up. And the will was never discussed until 2 weeks later. That's when Dad called us back to the house. He said the lawyer would be reading Grandma's updated will. Updated? That word haunted me. Why would she change anything? She was already fading when we spoke last. The day of the will reading was the first time I truly felt like an outsider in my own bloodline. The lawyer, a man I'd never met, read the document aloud in that formal, rehearsed tone. To Ethan, the lake house, all savings accounts, heirloom jewelry, and the family trust. To Martin, her remaining investments and antique collection. To me, nothing. Not even a mention, not a line, not even a condolence. I sat there in silence, blinking as if I'd misheard something. And that's when Dad did it. He waited until the lawyer left, then leaned toward me in that cold, rehearsed way of his and said, "Look, there's no easy way to say this, but the reason you weren't included is because you're not biologically mine, and June wasn't your real grandmother." I swear I didn't feel time stop. I felt time snap, like a bone breaking under pressure. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Was this grief? Was this a breakdown? Was this even real? I don't know how long I sat there, but what I do remember is that Ethan never looked surprised. He just stood beside our father, arms folded, jaw tight, like he was waiting for a reaction. Any reaction, but I gave them none. Not because I was strong, because I was stunned. They left the room eventually. I stayed behind, surrounded by photos of a family that may not have ever truly claimed me. But here's the thing. I wasn't just hurt, I was suspicious. Why drop that bomb now after Grandma was gone? Why had she been so clear in her last letter, her voice so certain when she said the lake house was mine? And why had Dad suddenly taken such a deep interest in her estate, despite barely visiting her those last few months? The questions started stacking like bricks. I didn't have the full picture, but I knew this much: something was off. Way off. So I did the only thing I could. I started looking. Back through emails, old texts, handwritten letters, photos, voicemail recordings. I even dug through the attic of Grandma's house the next morning, quietly, while Dad and Ethan were gone. And that's when I found it, tucked between the pages of a crossword puzzle book from 1994, a note, written in Grandma's unmistakable cursive, dated just 3 months before she passed. If you're reading this, it means someone tried to take what I left for you. Trust your instincts. Trust the lake house. It holds the truth. That was the moment I stopped being the daughter in mourning and started becoming the woman they underestimated. Because if they thought they'd buried the truth with her, they were about to learn that some legacies can't be rewritten, only revealed. I didn't sleep much after I found Grandma's note. I kept reading that one line over and over. Trust the lake house. It holds the truth. What did she mean? The lake house had been empty since her passing, locked, untouched, waiting for Ethan, its new owner. But I knew that house better than anyone. Every creaky board, every loose nail, every hiding place she used when playing scavenger hunts with me as a kid. And so I went back. I drove 2 hours in silence, pulled up the gravel driveway, and stared at the porch swing we used to sit on together. The air smelled like pine and damp wood. The door still had the hummingbird sticker I'd put there when I was 10. I had a spare key. Of course I did. Inside, everything was still, but not untouched. Furniture had been shifted. Closet doors left open. The file cabinet in her study, unlocked, emptied, and clearly rummaged through. They'd been here. They were looking for something, so I searched too, but not like them. Not wildly, not forcefully. I followed her clues. In the back corner of the guest bedroom closet, I found it. A cedar box taped to the bottom shelf behind an old shoe box labeled winter socks. Inside, a sealed envelope marked, "To be opened only if something feels wrong." I opened it with trembling hands. It was a letter. "If Martin or Ethan claim you were never mine, it's a lie. You were not born of Martin. No, but you are my daughter. I raised you. I loved you. I left the lake house to you. If this has changed, then someone has altered my will, and you must not let them get away with it." Tears welled up. Not from grief, this time from clarity, from fire. She knew, she anticipated this. And now I needed to prove it. I started digging. Step 1, the lawyer. The man who'd read the will, Mr. Caldwell, was new. Grandma had used a different attorney for over 20 years. Her original lawyer, a semi-retired man named Roger Whitman, still had his nameplate listed on her old files. So I called him. He sounded surprised to hear from me, but not upset. When I asked about Grandma's estate, there was a pause. "She changed her will?" he asked. "That's news to me." He hadn't been contacted after her death, hadn't filed anything, hadn't been asked to transfer records. Last I heard, he said, her will left the lake house and most of her assets to you. That was her intent. I asked if he still had a copy. He said yes, but it wasn't digital. It was in his archive boxes, stored at a small unit behind his office. I met him the next day. There it was, the original will, signed and witnessed 18 months before her death, naming me as the sole heir to the lake house, several accounts, and heirloom possessions. The new will had completely overwritten all of it, and Caldwell had never mentioned any of this. Step 2. The signatures. The signature on the updated will had bugged me since the moment I saw it. Grandma's cursive was always distinctive, soft loops, long descenders, and an extra flourish on the J. But the new one? Shorter, rushed. No flourish, just initials. I scanned both documents and showed them to a forensic handwriting expert, an old contact from my university days who now worked in legal consulting. She confirmed my suspicion. The signature on this revised will is inconsistent. Highly likely it was forged or signed under duress. Step 3. DNA distraction. Now remember what Dad told me? You're not really my daughter. That wasn't a confession. It was a decoy, a distraction to keep me from asking better questions. I ordered a DNA kit, sent it in, waited. 3 weeks later, the results came back. He was right. He wasn't my biological father. But what stood out was something else. A match. A first cousin. Someone I didn't know, but had Grandma's maiden name. I reached out. Turns out she was Grandma's niece, and she had been told about me years ago. Not only did she confirm that Grandma considered me her true daughter, she said, Aunt June once told me, if anything ever happens to me and the will doesn't go the way I planned, tell her to follow the paper trail. It always leads back to Martin. There it was. A breadcrumb trail of witnesses, a growing pile of evidence, and motive, clear as day. Step 4. Legal action. I contacted a probate attorney. I laid it all out, the forged signature, the disappearance of the original will, the coercive statement from Martin, the letter I found in the lake house, the records from the previous lawyer, and the trust clause I uncovered, which required inheritance to remain in the family line unless legally contested. The attorney looked me in the eye and said, this case isn't just winnable, it's explosive. But here's the part that mattered most to me. This wasn't about money. It was about the truth, about legacy, about not letting them erase me so easily, because I wasn't some mistake they could rewrite out of a story. I was the story, and I was just getting started. People think revenge looks like screaming, slamming doors, explosions, public confrontations, but real revenge, the kind that leaves a scar, it's quiet, it's paperwork, it's knowing something they don't know, yet. The moment my attorney filed the formal contest of the will, everything shifted. We submitted evidence. The forged signature verified by a handwriting expert. The original will retrieved from Grandma's former lawyer. The handwritten note she left in the lake house. A sworn statement from her niece. The disappearance of key estate files from her home. And perhaps most damning, the recording I found on an old voicemail backup app. See, Grandma had left me a birthday message the year before. I hadn't listened to it in months. But when I played it back, her voice said this. If your father ever tells you you're not mine, don't believe it. He's after the money, not the memories. Trust the lake house. It wasn't a smoking gun. It was an arsenal. Once the will contest was filed, things got very quiet on their side. Too quiet. Then, just days before our first court hearing, I got a text from Ethan. You don't know what you're doing. Back off. Don't ruin everything for a house. Not our family. Not Dad. Just everything. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about greed. It was desperation. And desperate people make mistakes. We filed for a temporary injunction to freeze the estate. That meant Ethan couldn't sell the lake house, couldn't access Grandma's accounts, and couldn't liquidate any of her assets until the will's validity was resolved. That single motion? It rattled them more than any argument could have. Our attorney discovered that 6 weeks before Grandma's death, the exact time the new will was supposedly signed, Dad had opened a private escrow account under Ethan's name. Into it? An anonymous wire transfer totaling $147,000. from one of Grandma's long-held investment funds. But guess what? The transfer was unauthorized, and more importantly, the signature on the release form? Forged again. I had no doubt who signed it. Martin had access to her house. He knew where she stored her documents. He probably thought she was too far gone to notice, but she did notice. That's why she left the letter. That's why she warned me. And now he was caught. I never wanted to go public with this, but someone at the courthouse leaked the hearing notice. Next thing I knew, a local reporter reached out. She was working on a series about contested wills and elder fraud. I hesitated. Then I thought about all the women like me, daughters, granddaughters, caretakers, who had been quietly erased by men who thought no one would question them. So I agreed to speak, anonymously at first. The article went viral in our community. Title: Daughter Denied Inheritance After Questioning Will. Family Secrets Emerge in Court Battle. The fallout was swift. Neighbors stopped waving at Martin. People canceled appointments with Ethan. Mom, who had been eerily silent throughout all this, called me late at night, whispering through tears, I swear I didn't know they were going to do this. And maybe she didn't. Or maybe she looked away because it was easier. Either way, I told her, this isn't about taking what's theirs. It's about reclaiming what was mine. Just when we thought the case was turning in our favor, their lawyer filed a countersuit. They claimed I was emotionally unstable, that I was harassing the family, that Grandma had changed her will willingly, and that I was manipulating her memory for financial gain. I won't lie, reading those accusations made me sick. It's one thing to fight over property. It's another to attack someone's grief, but it didn't scare me. Because every accusation they threw, I had receipts to burn them down. My therapist submitted a statement of mental fitness. We presented notarized timelines showing I hadn't contacted Ethan or Martin since the funeral. And the clincher? The handwriting analyst came forward under oath to say, this updated will was not signed by the same person as the prior one. There are clear indications of forgery, hesitation, and non-natural stroke movement consistent with simulation. Legal speak? Sure. But even the judge leaned forward during that testimony. And then came the moment I'd been preparing for. See, Grandma had also created a revocable living trust. It was mentioned in her files, but overlooked during the will reading. Inside, it was a clause titled, In the event of contest or coercion. It read, if any heir attempts to alter, forge, or suppress my estate wishes, their right to inheritance is forfeited, and all primary assets transferred to the next designated heir in my full name, provided evidence supports this breach. That clause had teeth. It wasn't just poetic, it was legal armor. And just like that, Martin and Ethan's grip on the estate cracked. But I wasn't done yet, because I still hadn't said a word to either of them, not directly. No angry calls, no confrontations, just silence. I wanted them to stew, to wonder how much I knew, to question whether I'd stop or whether this was just the beginning, because I wanted them to understand. They didn't lose to emotion. They lost to intelligence, to planning, to a daughter they tried to erase, who'd been quietly preparing for war. And the final blow? That was coming next. The courtroom was silent as the final hearing began. My heart was steady, not calm, but focused. I wasn't there to argue. I was there to finish what they started. Ethan sat 2 rows ahead, stiff-backed in his suit, pretending this was just business. Dad looked smug, as if years of community respect and polished charm could somehow override the mountain of evidence stacked against him. But they didn't know what was coming. Our attorney opened with everything we'd uncovered, the forged signatures, the hidden escrow transfers, the clause in the trust. The judge listened, occasionally scribbling notes, his face unreadable. And then came the moment we'd saved for last. Your Honor, my attorney said, we have one final piece of evidence. She pulled out a sealed envelope, small, yellowed, and marked in my grandmother's familiar cursive. It had been found just a week prior, wedged inside a floorboard compartment beneath a loose tile in the lake house bathroom. I'd remembered it from childhood. Grandma used to stash cash there just in case. The letter was addressed to the probate court. In it, Grandma wrote, if this reaches you, I fear my will has been altered. My original wishes were clear. My granddaughter is to inherit the lake house, not because of blood, but because of love and trust. If she is excluded, assume wrongdoing. She is my legacy. She is my choice. The courtroom didn't gasp, but you could feel the shift in the air, like a storm cloud lifting. And the judge? He folded the letter neatly, placed it beside the files, and looked straight at Martin. "Mr. Caldwell," he asked the opposing attorney, "do you have any rebuttal?" He stammered something about memory decline, about shifting family structures, about the ambiguity of handwritten notes. But the truth was airtight now. The verdict. The judge ruled the revised will null and void due to compelling evidence of forgery and coercion. The original will was reinstated. And thanks to the trust clause, both Martin and Ethan were disinherited entirely. All primary estate assets. The lake house, Grandma's jewelry, the family savings accounts were transferred to me. But it wasn't just about the money. It was the line in the sand. The legal system, so often tilted against women like me, stood with me. Because I had proof, I had truth. And I had a grandmother who planned for betrayal before it even happened. The fallout. Ethan tried to appeal, but it was denied. He and Dad were hit with legal fees, bad press, and a wave of community backlash. Their reputations gone. Their relationships fractured. Their inheritance evaporated. But I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. Didn't post anything online. Didn't even return their cold clipped texts asking for a private discussion. Because silence at this point was louder than any revenge speech. What hurt most? The hardest part wasn't the legal battle. It was facing the fact that my father had prepared this scheme. That he'd waited until Grandma was sick, until I was vulnerable, until the timing suited him. He didn't just want to win, he wanted to erase me. But here's the irony. In trying to erase me, he made me undeniable. He made me dig deeper into my roots, my past, my place in this family. And what I found wasn't just legal ground, it was emotional bedrock. I wasn't his by blood. But I was hers, by heart, by legacy, by choice. After the verdict, I received one last item, this time from Grandma's lawyer, Roger. He had been instructed to deliver it only if I won. It was a small deed envelope folded around a hand-drawn map of the lake property. On it, Grandma had written, "Expand the garden, it needs flowers again. And maybe a small library, too. Somewhere safe for your story to live." That's when I cried. Not from pain, not from anger, but from peace. She didn't just leave me a house, she left me a purpose. That lake house now. It's mine, officially, legally, irrevocably. But more than that, I made it into something new. I turned the old shed into a reading nook for girls in foster care. Planted sunflowers where weeds used to grow. Framed her letter in the front hallway right beside our first ever crossword puzzle. Because this wasn't just about inheritance. It was about identity. It was about standing up and saying, "You don't get to define me by bloodlines. You don't get to rewrite my worth. Not anymore." There's a quiet kind of justice that doesn't come with fanfare. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't shout, "I won." It just settles in, like warm light through a window after a long storm. That's what it felt like the first morning I woke up at the lake house, alone, at peace, and finally whole. No legal briefs, no threats. No one questioning whether I belonged. Just birdsong, morning mist, and the scent of cinnamon from a pie I baked the night before. Using her recipe, of course. After everything ended, I had a choice. I could close the door and never look back. Pretend it never happened. Leave the betrayal sealed away with court records and voicemail backups. But I didn't want the story to end in bitterness, because that's not who she raised me to be. So I made a different choice. I used a portion of the inheritance to open a student resource center right on the edge of the lake property. It's small, just 3 rooms and a garden. But it's powerful. We call it June's Legacy. It's a space for students who've been financially cut off by controlling parents. For kids who are being manipulated, coerced, erased. We help them apply for emergency aid, negotiate scholarships, understand their legal rights. Because no one should have to fight for their future alone. And no one should be told their worth is measured by someone else's bloodline. I used to think justice would feel like fireworks, like some dramatic, movie-worthy ending. But it didn't. It felt like walking into a room and breathing easier. It felt like putting your hand on a doorknob and knowing no one can take this from me again. And more than anything, it felt like finally hearing her voice in my mind without it being drowned out by anger. She once told me, "Sometimes the people who break you are the ones who unknowingly teach you how to rebuild better." I never understood what she meant until now. Maybe you've been told you don't belong. Maybe someone's tried to reduce you to a label: illegitimate, unworthy, unstable, inconvenient. Let me tell you something I wish I'd heard sooner. You don't need their permission to exist. You don't need their name to have value. And you sure as hell don't need their inheritance to build a life that matters. Because legacy isn't about what you're handed. It's about what you protect, what you fight for, what you grow. I didn't win because I was cruel. I didn't win because I yelled the loudest. I won because I stayed calm. Because I got smart. Because I stopped needing approval and started demanding truth. I still keep her letter framed above the reading nook. The one that says, "If they try to erase you, dig deeper. You know the truth." That truth became my map, my torch, my anchor. And now, it's yours too. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had to defend your place in your own family? Have you ever been told you didn't deserve something just because someone else said so? If this story resonated with you, share your truth in the comments. I read every single one. Tell me, what did they try to take from you? And what did you take back? And if this story stirred something in you, subscribe to this channel. Because these aren't just stories. They're blueprints for survival, for strategy, for silent revolutions, for women like us who were told we were nothing and quietly became everything. Next time, I'll tell you about a cruise my family invited everyone on except me. They told me Grandma was in the hospital and needed me to stay behind. But when they came back with tans and souvenirs, they didn't expect what I found waiting on the porch. It wasn't revenge. It was something far more permanent. So don't miss that. Because if you've ever felt left behind, just wait till you see what happens when you stop chasing and start choosing yourself.